I would just say a couple of things in case anybody does watch this, or is watching this from our third order. I thought I'd take a moment just to talk about Holy Father St. Francis. We haven't been able to do this for, last year we didn't do it, and we did the year before that, so it's been a while since we did this last. So not just for the third order, but for the Friars. First off, for the third order, this is our new chapel, so thankfully we're moved in here. It's not completely done yet, but we have a little bit more space. But for the Feast of Holy Father St. Francis, it's good to have a little bit of reflection on what in the world, how we can direct our thoughts and participate more fully. And of course, with St. Francis, the main thing always has to be on imitation. The first thing has to always be on imitation of his virtue, but also of his imitation of following the virtue of Christ. What I've been finding, and what we will all continue to find, is as we continue along a path of holiness, so we hope we're following a path of holiness, there comes that time where we start to, and unfortunately I've been hearing this from some in the third order, that they actually are starting to find the rule to be a burden. It's a burden. It's exactly right. It's a burden. We take a burden on our shoulders. Christ came into the world to receive a burden. He didn't have to. We've sinned and we belong. We deserve to have a burden placed on our shoulders. Something that we have to carry until our very last day, so that we can not only make up for our past sins, but also for that of our neighbor, and most especially just for the simple question of, or the simple purpose of giving glory and honor to God in imitating Jesus Christ, our dear blessed Lord, who came into the world to take a burden on his shoulders. And that's the problem with today, is so many Catholics want to face the world like worldlings. They want God to take away their burdens. We don't, as Franciscans, we don't want that. As Franciscans, we want to take on a burden. We want a rule that gives us a burden that conforms us to Christ, a conformity to Christ that leads us to heaven. So we want a burden. I want to be restricted in my freedom so that I can be free. I want to be led with the rope, like our Lord was led with the rope to my crucifixion. And that's why we follow a rule, because it should crucify our flesh. And that's one thing for the friars to say, because we live a very strict way of life. The bell rings, we come to prayer. We stay at prayer, and if you have to go to the bathroom even, you've got to ask permission. We restrict ourselves and we abandon ourselves to providence by not allowing ourselves freedom, for the sole purpose so that we can be free. People in the world have their freedom, and then when it's restricted, they complain because it's a burden. We can't complain for the burden. We Franciscans, first order, we long to live, work, suffer, and die. Be consumed and die. Those in the world say that, and then they don't do it. As soon as the burden comes, they feel the prick of the flesh, and they say, there's a burden. I'm not sure I want to keep this burden. There you go. You're slipping into diffidence. We find it all around us in a world that's become so effeminate. Do you see? So we friars want to help the third order. We obviously want to help the lay people embrace a way of life so they can take on a burden. I talked to one of our third order members who just said to me, I took on a burden. That's exactly what I want to hear. I took on a burden. I want a burden. I want to be burdened with Christ. I want to live as a burden to Christ in the world, and that's our imitation of St. Francis. He took it on to the point where his flesh was crucified, and everybody could see it. What was worse, being crucified or knowing people could see it? I know he restricted it, but we know with even St. Pio, who had it for 50 years, it was such a humiliation that people could see he had been crucified. Do you see? So we take on a burden, not that we want to boast of our burden, though it is something to boast of. It is something to boast of, to take on the cross of Christ and live it to the end. Our humiliations are something to boast about. Our infirmities are something to boast about. Our humiliations are something to boast about. These are our glories. It's not the glory of whether or not we're known or appreciated, or whether or not we're able to sing or not able to sing, or contribute or don't contribute. No, it's the burden. Our ability to take on the burden, to live the burden, and to be conformed to the burden Christ. Do you see? It's just completely contrary. It's absolutely contrary to the way everybody thinks, and it's contrary to the way we think. If you don't stay in front of it, if you don't constantly stay in front of the thought and the desire to be burdened, you'll throw it off. You'll throw it off no matter how late in your vocation. You'll throw off the shackles of being burdened. Do you see? And we can't let it happen. One of the things we've been reading in our morning formation has to do with the patience. And that patience being peace. Do you remember the main concept there was peace? It really is a thing that we have to remember, that when our peace gets disturbed, we're ready to throw off the burden. How do you beat it? You don't let your peace get disturbed. St. Francis, when you see even older images of him, nowadays we get kind of sick of it because they had all these peace meetings at Assisi and it makes people sick, the things that happen there. But when you see St. Francis, he is the man of peace. He's the great man of peace because Christ was the beatific man and St. Francis was the resurrected Christ. That's what they said of him. But the resurrected Christ brings peace. We even talked to these good Protestants today, and we found in them, when we started to talk about it, they started to understand things, and they understood there's peace here. You see? The peace comes from the fact we don't let Satan come in. Or we shouldn't let him come in. Because you know the moment you're ready to throw off the shackles, it's because you let him come in. The moment, that's that whole, that Asuna talks about, thoughts cause wars at the door if the gates aren't shut. You let the burden come in. You let the peace be disturbed. There you go. You're not going to be able to control the tidal wave that's going to sweep you away. Next thing you're going to do, throw off the burden. Do you see? We want the burden. We want the burden because we want to be men of peace. We must be men of peace. And that is penance. Do you see? That's how you mortify. Penance is a constant life of mortification. And if we don't mortify constantly, that is, renounce those things we have a right to sometimes, then we will get enslaved. If we do that, if we be those men of peace and we do that mortification, we're free. Because you're detached and there's nothing that anybody can do to you. Even the devil, if he convinces you the whole world's against you, you don't care. You've consecrated yourself to the Blessed Virgin Mary in the service of St. Francis to be somebody who has emptied himself for the love of God. Whether you're in the first order or you're in the third order. In the third order, it's difficult because you're tainted completely by your surroundings all the time. And so, you see the burden. I want to be able to eat meat when the days I'm not allowed to. I want to be able to watch Netflix. The superficial junk that you have to deal with out in the world, it's laughable. Absolutely laughable. We don't have to face it because we just turn it off. We walk away from it. We're dead. We put on a habit, we're dead to it. You say, well, we're out here for you don't understand. Luddite. We're not Luddites. That stuff's destroying you, and you know it's destroying you. Turn it off. You've taken on a burden. Now, in the world, the burden might seem like it's heavier, but we're talking about not going to a certain restaurant, not going to see a certain movie, not paying for some subscription so you can watch movies whenever you want to, not having one of those phones that's constantly requiring your attention and absorbing all of your thoughts. We don't have any of that. Thanks be to God, we don't have any of that. But for us, we can get sucked into things even more insignificant. What this brother said, what that brother said, how the superior treated me, how I got the wrong room, I have to sit here, I don't like this. Whatever the little thought is that disturbs that peace, there you go. You're going to throw off the shackles of your burden. So remember, we want to be men of burden. We want to be burdened because we want to imitate the Christ who came into the world only to take on a burden. And we do that by following St. Francis, who most perfectly became the man of burden. Do you see? And that's why he was a man of peace. He accepted it. And we want to accept it.